And I'm Leisha. I'm the editorial assistant for Imprint, and I am the other interviewer slash moderator today. Thank y'all for coming.
So let's begin the second half of this evening. So to begin with, Katie, could you start by introducing yourself to us in the audience? Thank you. So could you start by introducing yourself to us in the audience, just a little bit about yourself, your name, program mail, and a little bit about your platform.
Hello. Okay. Hi, my name is Katie Trainer. I'm in 2B planning. My pronouns are she, her. And I guess you could say a little bit about me is that I grew up in Singapore, which is the fun fact that makes me feel very unique when I bring it up to people. And my platform is really about making a positive impact at the University of Waterloo and really creating a valuable difference in students' lives. Some of my main profiles include affordable housing, mental health, the international student experience since I personally lived abroad and I understand what it's like to come to a new environment and feel a little bit out of place. And then another one that I think is very valuable and a part of my role is Vice President of WUSA, if I am being fit for the position, is creating a better post-secondary education.
And you described in you wrote an AMA a lot of your previous experience in student government, for example, in the Ontario Undergrad Student Association, I think it was, right, being a delegate. Given your all your all-rounder experience, which is very impressive, how will you be applying these skills to the position of Vice President?
I would say the skill set that I really have to offer as Vice President involves my program, which is planning. We're all about policy and regulation, and I know not a lot of students actually know about planning at the University of Waterloo, but my description of it is that as planners, we plan cities and we plan futures. And a part of being in my degree is learning how to create a positive impact on communities, learning about them, engaging in them, as well as creating solutions and identifying ways that we can improve our current way of life. So my knowledge of my degree is something that I would apply while being Vice President of WUSA. And in terms of my work experience as well as volunteer experience, I believe I have a lot to offer. For example, I do have a little bit of an extensive knowledge of several resources on campus. That includes my knowledge of campus housing since I've worked with them for a few years, so I do understand how housing is something that is a very important topic for students studying at the University of Waterloo, as well as during multiple leadership positions and coordinator positions, I believe I've become someone who can be a role model to other students, and that's through my ability of being very flexible in my time management, knowing when deadlines are due, and acting accordingly, and including my passion for just making a positive change. I think these are the skills as well as the values that will really help me in the position of Vice President and assist the Board of Directors.
Thank you, Katie. So you have experience with like a lot of campus groups, a lot of groups which work with WUSA as well as other parts of the university. Now specifically when it comes to WUSA, can you describe in your own words how the organization functions and how it advocates for students?
From my current understanding of the current governance policy, it is a lot of advocacy, which is something that I guess you could say I do have more of an understanding of since I have been actively involved on multiple student societies such as ESS, the Environment Student Society, as their environment director, as well as PSA, the Planning Student Association. And, sorry,
Sure, I just wanted to ask if you can in your own words describe how WUSA functions and how it advocates for students, or how it's supposed to advocate for students.
Back to the question, my current understanding of the governance policy is that issues are raised to the Board of Directors, and then as Vice President of WUSA, it is my responsibility and job to help assist the Board of Directors as well as the organization and president address these challenges and issues that have been raised by our student body. And the methods and the ways that we do that is through policy implementation and investigating methods and ways that we can help improve student lives through research, data, as well as advocacy.
And what part of WUSA's long-range 2020 to 2025 plan do you think you'll be working on in your time in office?
I would say for WUSA's 2025 plan, something that I would really like to work on during my residency in office, if I am deemed an eligible candidate, would be housing affordability. I think it's something that we could really work on in the University of Waterloo. For example, in the future roadmap, it addresses satellite campuses as well as how there's really a deficit of housing affordability in Waterloo, not only because we have a growing student population, but also because the housing market as it is right now doesn't fit or suit the needs of students who are coming to university. For example, there's frauds, scams, and it really takes a toll on a student's mental health and social well-being. And because of that, that's something I would really like to focus on while being vice president. And the ways that I have tried to target that before gaining nominations for this position was, for example, starting a collaborative project with one of my friends in my program, which involves Map the System. We're targeting affordable housing and looking at cooperatives in Waterloo and the potential of that. So investigating cooperatives as well as policy and regulation and finding ways that we can assist students with even financial aid is something that I would be very interested in. Another thing is, I know WUSA already has a workshop going for housing too, but in my personal experience, I've also worked with IPC, and they've done, which is the International Peer Community, which unfortunately not that many people know about, but I think it's a really important society and community at the University of Waterloo. And we also do workshops on the do's and don'ts of housing. Although we don't offer professional advice, something we do offer is experiences and essentially a knowledge library. And I think improving the one that WUSA also has and developing the handbook outlined in the roadmap is something that would be very valuable.
And can you give some more specifics, if you can, on how WUSA would financially support students looking for housing? Like, would that come from our student fees or funding from the university, for example?
In terms of financial support, I would say I don't have a huge knowledge depth on the ways that we can do that right now, especially in my position. Although I'm still a second-year student, I still believe I have much to learn. And before, let's say, entering the position of Vice President of WUSA, I hope to gain a more in-depth understanding of housing through the multiple projects that I'm pursuing right now.
Thank you. So, with that in mind, you've addressed like some of your specific goals in office. You've addressed some of your priorities, and so you've addressed some of your specific goals in office, some of your specific priorities. And what would be, so what exactly would be the roadmap towards achieving these goals within the framework of how WUSA functions?
I believe in my position, since the new governance model is something based on advocacy, and I would work directly with the board of directors, this would be something that we would have to discuss and approach as a team. I, as an individual, probably might have knowledge on this, but having a wide and diverse range of perspectives will help guide us into the future. And that's something I hope I can achieve once elected or in the position itself. For my personal goal, I would say it's really just about helping find alternatives to housing that will also address different scams as well as frauds that are currently in Waterloo that are causing students distress. And that is continuing on the current roadmap that WUSA has.
So you just mentioned that you would discuss issues that students brought up with the board. You mentioned in your AMA that you thought that the new governance model would sort of take the quote-unquote like tedious decision-making process off of the backs of student leaders. But do you think that maybe that's don't you think that maybe like the point of those student leaders would be to make those decisions to have more of a say in the specifics of how those goals might be achieved? Yeah, so you just mentioned that you want to discuss the issues that students bring up with the board of directors, right? But you mentioned in your AMA that you thought that the new governance model would take the more tedious parts of decision-making off the backs of student leaders. But don't you think that maybe that is the job of student leaders, which is to have a hand, or have a say in each step of the plan in order to deliver to the students as best as possible?
I think that is a very valuable point brought up, and I know I also mentioned it in the Reddit AMA as well. But I think it's also important to understand student burnout too, which was a previous governance problem, which did happen when a lot of student leaders were put in positions of decision making. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I want to achieve a balance. I think it's important that we can alleviate the burden of students burning out, not only like board of directors members, but also students studying at the University of Waterloo, which is also why I brought up the issue, the challenge of mental health, because it is an important and universal challenge that most university students face. And that's why I think it's more of a collaborative process. So yes, decision making can be made at such a level, but it should also, as said in the referendum, keep in mind the entire student body.
So, thank you for your answer for that, by the way. Student engagement with WUSA has been considerably lower and on a continuous decline for the past few years. For example, like even in this election, there was only one candidate for each officer role. What steps would you sort of take to increase student engagement, student engagement with WUSA and sort of communicate what WUSA is doing in a way that makes students care more about student politics at Waterloo?
I would say it's not that I don't think students aren't invested in their own future, what the student governments do. I think it's a combination of different social and environmental factors. For example, as students, sometimes we only really realize something is happening unless it happens to us ourselves. And a way that I think we can increase engagement is just having a very effective, I guess you could say, marketing approach. For example, while working on student societies, something that always comes up is engagement. Sometimes we don't have enough engagement. Sometimes when it comes to election periods, we get questions of, oh, I didn't hear about the election going on, I would have done it, I wish I could have done it now. And I think one way to really, let's say, help student societies, because student societies are an important part of WUSA, really achieve that engagement and bring more attention to student challenges, is to elevate different platforms and different voices of students studying at the University of Waterloo. An example of that could be, although we have a campus life fair for different clubs and communities at the University of Waterloo, I think it'd be amazing to also have different society days where students can really interact and engage with their student governments and not only get to know people who are in those positions, but also propose their own ideas. I think that would also increase engagement. Another alternative to that would probably be maybe having more cross-faculty approaches to engagement. For example, in my current experience, I feel like there is a gap, or I guess you could say widening gap between collaborative experiences between different faculties. And I don't think it should be that way, because I think as a university, as well as a student body, we should be joined in a resolution for achieving a better post-secondary education. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. So I had a follow-up to that. So one thing you mentioned is that there needs to be more of a cross-faculty approach with students. So what specific ways would you address having that cross-faculty approach? Do you have any ideas in mind? And if so, what are those ideas?
When I think of this question, I like to think back to one of the Reddit posts actually, that talked, where one student actually brought up the fact that they didn't know that so many programs were at the University of Waterloo. And one of the reasons why I think that is, which kind of contributes to this gap between collaborative projects between faculties, is because once we arrive at the University of Waterloo, it's a lot of just being a part of your faculty. I think it should be shifted towards being a part of the student welfare, the student society. All of us as a collaborative group of students who are fighting for a cause and a better post-secondary education, rather than just a centralized focus about stuff and opportunities that you may be able to do in your faculty. In order to do that, I know we discussed it a little bit earlier, but orientation is a great approach to doing this too. It's the first step that students have when they come to the University of Waterloo to get to know different students from different faculties, and perhaps having more events that introduce students across separate faculties would be a good way to get things going. And I do understand that co-op might put a wrench in this plan, because although you meet people from different faculties, sometimes they'll have a different co-op stream, and that kind of also influences your friendship with them. Because one moment you're in Waterloo, one moment you're not. So having a way to, I guess you could say, address the deficit between cross-faculty approaches and projects would really be increased outreach and increased approaches to understanding the goals of each faculty and working on something together and really addressing that communication gap.
Great. So we've talked about student clubs, we've talked about student societies. Another thing that WUSA does is the WUSA runs a number of student-run services. And so essentially I just want to get a general sense of how do you view the role of student-run services on campus, and how do you view their relationship with WUSA?
I would say the first student service that I would like to identify, which I believe was also discussed in the roadmap, was health services. I think health services are a very important part of a student's life while attending the University of Waterloo. And I think the engagement between health services and WUSA is very essential, and that's why I'm very happy to see that in the roadmap there was a discussion about an expansion. Maybe not in the roadmap specifically, but I think maybe expanding health services and the resources that they provide would be very important into the future of WUSA.
Yes, so I was asking how do you view the role of the student-run services in WUSA? The health services is a university service. So when I'm talking about student-run services, I'm talking about things like WUSA food services, GLOW, Women's Center Advocacy, Women's Center Raise, Co-op Connection, Bike Center, things like those. And how do you view those services, the roles of those services, as well as the relationship with WUSA?
From what I understand, the relationship with WUSA is an agreement, which has certain goals, regulations, and policies that aim to affect as well as improve student welfare. I apologize for my delay on that. I just wanted clarification on what exactly was the direction of how I'd be speaking on this. I believe that there's many improvements that we can make to our current services at WUSA. And a good way of understanding that is increasing the scope and our spectrum of ideas on how to improve that. For example, improving the scope of health services at the University of Waterloo, expanding our ability to reach and connect with other students. In my personal experience, sometimes when booking a health service appointment, it might take a long time to actually get these services and resources that you might need. And finding ways to elevate that issue is something that I find very important. Another example that I would like to bring up is inclusive environments. I think it's really important that students feel at home and feel that they're in a safe and valuable environment at the University of Waterloo. For example, there have been cases where students have addressed their safety on campus, and I think finding ways to elevate or inhibit, challenge, pardon me. I think finding ways to help students feel more at ease while studying at the University of Waterloo is very important. Another aspect is re-envisioning essentially the university as a whole. Like I mentioned in the Reddit AMA, the University of Waterloo had a vision for how this campus space would look and how the services would be provided. And I think focusing on another version of that, including student voices, would be very important.
Thank you for that, Katie. So I understand that helping like advocate to health services for increased services would be a priority, but I also so I want to go back to the question because I want to know specifically about the WUSA, the services which WUSA operates. Health services is not one of them. So for context, I'll just give you an example of some of those student-run services. So we have MATES, which is like which is the service where students can go to students can go to MATES for mental health support. We have services like Women's Center, Raise and Glow. There's the Indian International Canadian Student Network and other services. And these services are operated by WUSA. And in specific, I was wondering, what do you view? How do you view the role of these services, and how do you view their relationship with WUSA?
I think they're essential services on furthering the development of student welfare on campus. They each individually address specific challenges as well as address gaps that some students may face. I'll leave that at that.
Thank you. So just wanted to follow up on that. Certain services, for example, Raise, Glow and Women's Center, also deal with a little bit of advocacy themselves, and they're dealing with this advocacy within the framework that WUSA allows them to. How do you view their role of doing advocacy while elected WUSA representatives are also dealing with advocacy? How do you view like where the balance is there, and how do you think WUSA and these services can engage in this advocacy cohesively together?
I would say a way that WUSA can assist these services with increasing advocacy and engagement is really finding out their key goals and having clear communication between what their desired future is, what projects they would like to pursue, and what exactly they would like to help students with going into the future. I think a key factor in this would be transparency. It's a very important topic in student government, and having a way for other students to know exactly what's going on, what the future goals are of these services would be very valuable.
I know that earlier we touched briefly on how you like to see improvements in student services at school, like you mentioned health services. Can you give any more specifics on how you would address something like, on how you would address the mental health issues at school, both regarding students' mental health and also the overall state of mental health services at Waterloo? Earlier, you mentioned some things about how you like to see some services improved in school, like, for example, health services. Can you give some specifics on how you plan to address mental health issues at Waterloo, which is both in regards to students' mental health and also the state of mental health services at the school?
I would say it's very hard to say what way I would directly address this because mental health encompasses many broad topics, and it's not just an individual problem because it comes in or can be seen in many different individuals in many different ways. I would say a way that I personally can help in this process while being Vice President of WUSA would be understanding. I think as an elected official, you have to really understand the problems as well as the challenges that students face And through that understanding, then I could begin to develop methods and approaches that would really help improve the services that can address mental health as well as student welfare.
Thank you. So another thing WUSA does as a body which advocates for students is that it advocates for students, right? So how would you ensure that WUSA continues to advocate for the marginalized groups on campus?
I would say for the ways that WUSA can continuously advocate for marginalized groups on campus is through the consistent support of our current services. For example, we talked about the Women's Center, we talked about WIGS, and really helping them achieve their future goals is one of the ways of doing that, and assisting them in their advocacy and engagement with students who are studying at the University of Waterloo.
Thank you. Great. So now moving on to the vice president role, like specifically. So one thing the vice president does is the vice president advocates to the provincial, federal, and municipal governments. So what are going to be your advocacy priorities at the provincial level once you're if you're elected?
I would say my advocacy priorities would be really helping develop a better post-secondary education. For example, we're at a time now that we have essentially learned from COVID and moved past this hybrid model. And especially now when we're moving on to this scope of employment opportunities for students who are studying at different universities, it's really important for us to essentially match our services or match our abilities on an international playing field. For example, we have courses readily available for students, but sometimes we need to revise these courses and really look towards the future planning and what students might need in their future employment as well as the opportunities that they might require further down the line. Another example of this would be, for example, we have co-op courses. Some might say we could definitely improve on the co-op courses that we provide. That includes services provided on Waterloo Works, that includes different job boards that students can gain access to, and also improvements to PD1 courses or professional development courses that can really help students in the future of their careers and with their dreams and aspirations.
So with that in mind, could you give an example of a recent provincial or municipal government decision that you think has had the greatest effect of students like ability to thrive at Waterloo?
At this moment, I don't think I can directly speak on that.
All right, thank you.
So we have discussed also previously the issue of housing. Can you give some more specifics on that as well, like on your plans to, like how you plan to follow through on your campaign promise of increasing, transparency and helping students learn their rights with regards to housing?
I think a part of addressing the housing problem in Waterloo, but also across Ontario, is really analyzing policy and regulations that we have in place. And although we have, let's say, a standardized contract for leasing, typically a lot of students aren't always informed or don't realize that there is a knowledge library out there of resources that they can refer to that will inform them of what to look out for in housing, and what resources that they can use as students going into the future. For example, WUSA legal services. There could be improvements for students to really develop a better understanding of their housing rights and what they are entitled to while living, for example, at university. But I believe policy and regulation also play an important part into this. For example, let's take planning, for example. In planning, we have maps that essentially tell us the zoning principles and what the region of Waterloo for this entire area that includes housing. And when you really examine that and look into the policies and regulations that go behind that, a lot of it is a combination of political, social, cultural, and environmental factors that might inhibit a student's ability to get access to affordable housing. I hope that answered.
So another campaign priority of yours that you've stated is that you want to improve the international student experience. In your Reddit AMA, you pointed out some of the concerns that international students might have, and again, I just really want to know whether you have any specifics as to how to deal with, like specific plans as to how to deal with these issues within the framework that WUSA allows you.
Some of the issues that I highlight for the international student experience is developing a sense of place. For example, when you first come to the University of Waterloo, sometimes you might not understand all of the challenges and the different experiences that you might encounter. For example, homesickness. It's something that happens to a lot of students because we are away from something that feels familiar to us. And I believe one of the ways that that can be addressed is really encouraging more of a cultural integration to remind students of their homes and make them feel at place at the University of Waterloo, which can also inevitably help improve their mental and social well-being. I think another way that of improving the international student experience is really pushing and advocating for an extensive list of resources. And like I mentioned before, a knowledge library that will aim to really improve and service international students when they first come to the University of Waterloo.
Great. Another, I want to go back to your Reddit AMA. You also stated that you want to see some improved secondary education. You've talked about this related as well. You've pointed like some of your concerns would be like increased, we need improved accessibility on campus. You've mentioned that there are courses which could be outdated, as well as the need for more inclusive spaces on campus. So how do you, how do you plan on addressing these issues? So you pointed out what the issues are that we need to address. What are your plans as to how you want to address these?
I think the way to address most of the challenges that I had raised is really through extensive planning. For example, in order to really overcome obstacles and challenge going into the future, you need a collaborative approach from multiple stakeholders and a very conclusive plan on how to move forward. Of course, I don't have the expertise currently on how to do that within WUSA because I'm not in the vice president role. However, I think developing a very concrete plan based on the advocacy or the extent of advocacy as well as policies that WUSA can put in place is one of the ways to really move forward and address these challenges.
So with WUSA's new governance system kind of still in the process of being actualized, you did also say that one of your goals as vice president was to increase the transparency in general between governments and students, right? How would you make sure that WUSA was sort of held accountable to students? And how would you make sure that that information was readily available to students?
In order to be held accountable for actions that one takes, I believe there has to be an equal balance of information on both sides. For example, in order to be transparent, you have to abide by certain principles and policies. And part of that is being very clear and communicating openly with students about, for example, finances, future plans and future goals, and how exactly those goals will be implemented.
Thank you for your answer.
Again, and in the spirit of transparency within that same way, and I also want to you as well as aware of what you will be doing when you are advocating to external bodies such as the provincial, municipal and federal governments. What are your plans to ensure that the student body is fully aware of what your advocacy priorities are and how they're going?
Well, I think a good example that I can probably refer to is the reporting done, as well as for example, the updates that WUSA typically sends out, reporting on what activities, let's say the board of director, the president, or even the vice president does in their role or during their period of presidency, is a way to really communicate and engage with the student body. But I think another great example is, for instance, the engagement that's currently going on in our current campaigning period. For example, the results of effort done to really push students to vote this time around, and not only through marketing materials such as posters, promotional material online, and really discussing different platforms, really discussing different challenges on different social media platforms is a really great way to engage with students. And although that engagement might not be as it was in previous years, or might not be as much as we would like it to, I believe through perhaps really collaborating with different societies, communities on campus is a great way to do that. For example, a lot of students are actively participating in different clubs, sports groups, as well as communities, and finding a way that perhaps we can centralize the focus of all of those communities, groups, and societies for one day will really target students who have yet to become more engaged with the student body or student government.
Sounds great. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about was student spaces on campus. When you talked about improved secondary education and your MA, you addressed that we need to re-envision campus spaces and the future of campus as a whole. And you said students we need to address at leisure spaces, recreation, social, education, we have a variety of needs. Could you address some of these needs as to what specific needs do you think these campus spaces need to fulfill? What do you think WUSA's role in getting these campus spaces would be, and what do you think your specific role would be when doing this?
Pertaining to my specific role, I think a big part of advocacy, as well as communicating on a municipal and local level, including discussing and communicating as well as maintaining links with communities on campus, is that there is a goal for envisioning the future of our campuses. For example, when people talk about sustainability, when we think about inclusivity, and when we think about presidents in terms of the future of university campuses, I would like the University of Waterloo to be that. I think there's many improvements that we can make on addressing accessibility needs. For example, in older buildings that we have on campus, they have been identified for renovation or complete demolition. And the idea of rebuilding those sites into what the student body as well as student societies believe is the most appropriate way of becoming a president or an example of a good post-secondary educational institute is something that I believe will address improving post-secondary education and creating a more livable campus space.
And do you have any sort of last comments that you would like to say to the students? Anything that you want to reaffirm or remind them of?
I'll try speaking to the audience this time. I know that I probably might not be the first pick as well, because I am a second-year student, but I would like to emphasize that although I cannot achieve perfection, I do strive for excellence in everything that I do. And I think that's very visible in the multiple engagements that I have done on campus between my 1A to 2B term, where I've still maintained an excellent standing in my program, and also been very flexible in all of the different activities and engagements that I've done. I'm really passionate about making a positive change And if there's one thing that I would like you guys to take away from my long ramble on becoming Vice President of WUSA is that I really want